During World War II, the Atlantic Ocean was a deadly battlefield. Nazi U-boats prowled beneath the waves, sinking Allied ships with ruthless efficiency. These submarines were part of Germany's plan to cut off crucial supply routes to Britain and other allies, hoping that a shortage of essential goods would tip the war in their favor. But in the midst of this perilous struggle, a small community in Matthews County, Virginia, rose to the challenge. They were the Matthews men, 7 brothers and their neighbors, merchant mariners who braved the high seas to keep vital supply lines open and the Allied war effort alive. Welcome to History's Hidden Tales, where today we explore an incredible story of courage, sacrifice, and survival. Matthews County is a quiet place with a long maritime heritage nestled along the Chesapeake Bay. Generations of families here depended on the water for fishing, boat building, and trade, passing down their knowledge of navigation and seamanship. Yet when the world was plunged into the turmoil of World War II, these same men took on a new mission. They became merchant mariners tasked with ferrying essential cargo across the treacherous Atlantic. They operated in the shadows of history for a time, but they soon proved indispensable to the fight against Hitler. At the heart of this tale is Captain Jesse Hodges and his 7 sons. Like many from Matthews County, they answered the call to serve, not in the military, but as civilians on some of the most dangerous routes of the war. The men of the Merchant Marine were considered soft targets by Germany, as their ships had limited defensive capabilities. Still, they sailed on, driven by a sense of duty and the knowledge that every successful crossing delivered weapons, food, and supplies crucial to Allied forces. The Merchant Marine played a pivotal role in the war. These civilian sailors transported troops, artillery, and fuel wherever they were needed. Without their steady stream of cargo, the Allied armies and navies would have lacked the resources required to fight effectively. But their missions came with towering risks. The Atlantic was infested with German U-boats, which lurked beneath the waves in wolf packs, tracking convoys in hopes of crippling Allied supply lines. Merchant mariners had to rely on convoy escorts, strategic zigzagging, and sheer luck to avoid sudden disaster. Between 1939 and 1945, U-boats sank more than 2,800 merchant ships. The toll in lives was enormous, with each sinking representing the loss of valuable cargo and, tragically, the men aboard. Yet despite these grim statistics, the Matthews men kept crossing the ocean because they believed in the greater cause. Some had relatives in the military and saw their merchant service as a patriotic duty on par with any branch of the armed forces. Life at sea was grueling. Crews endured long hours, frigid weather, and nights haunted by the threat of torpedoes. Their ships were cramped, and supplies like fresh food and water had to be carefully rationed. Storms in the North Atlantic were ferocious. Waves crashed over decks and battered hulls, testing even the most experienced sailors. But the Matthews men were raised on the water and drew on their shared background for strength. The camaraderie they forged aboard these ships was a powerful antidote to the terror lurking beneath the ocean's surface. One particularly harrowing incident involved a Hodges brother aboard a ship that was struck by a torpedo in the icy Atlantic. The hull tore apart, sending seawater flooding in. Despite the chaos, he helped crewmates into lifeboats, clung to hope in the freezing waters, and was eventually rescued days later. Such brushes with death were common, and not everyone survived. Drifting in lifeboats after a torpedo strike was no guarantee of salvation, since exposure, thirst, and new enemy attacks posed ongoing threats. Still, the Matthews men were not just surviving, they were making a critical difference. Their consistent deliveries of food, fuel, and ammunition kept Allied ground forces strong. Without merchant mariners, it's doubtful that operations like D-Day could have launched on schedule, much less succeeded in the monumental way they did. As convoys pushed across the ocean, they carried everything from tanks to hospital supplies, ensuring that frontline soldiers had what they needed to fight and eventually push back Hitler's armies. By war's end, the Matthews men and thousands of other merchant mariners had transported millions of tons of cargo. Their role was vital to major Allied triumphs, including the Normandy invasion and the final offensives in Europe. Military historians note that seemingly mundane shipments, like crates of spare parts or barrels of oil, could spell the difference between success and disaster on the battlefield. If these items failed to arrive, entire operations could grind to a halt. But these successes came at a staggering price. Thousands of merchant mariners died, many from tight-knit communities like Matthews County. Families mourned the loss of fathers, sons, and husbands, who had set out to sea with the promise of returning victorious. The heartbreak in Matthews County was palpable, as loved ones received telegrams bearing the worst kind of news. Even survivors came home with physical and emotional scars, having witnessed unimaginable horrors in burning ships and raging seas. Despite their enormous contribution, merchant mariners didn't receive the recognition or benefits granted to other servicemen. They had fought in one of the deadliest theaters of the war, but official accolades took decades to arrive. Many felt overlooked, as if the public considered them mere cargo carriers rather than participants in a life-and-death struggle. Only in recent years have books, documentaries, and memorials begun to spotlight their heroic efforts and the indispensable role they played. Today, the Matthews men are finally getting their due. Accounts of their bravery bring their stories vividly to life, illustrating how ordinary people can rise to extraordinary challenges in moments of crisis. Historians continue to uncover personal letters, photographs, and records that document their trials at sea. In piecing these fragments together, we see a portrait of perseverance, a testament to the resilience of those who risked everything to preserve freedom. Matthews County may be small, but its impact was outsized. The Matthews men refused to be intimidated by torpedo-laden waters or frigid gales, showing that courage can thrive even in the most perilous conditions. Their story goes beyond maritime strategy. It speaks to the universal human capacity for sacrifice, hope, and solidarity. At a time when so much hung in the balance, they sailed forward, guided by duty and faith in the Allied cause. Thank you for joining us as we revisit the legacy of the Matthews men and honor their place in history. If you found this episode of History's Hidden Tales enlightening, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive. And don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. What other overlooked heroes or stories from the past would you like us to explore next? Until then, keep seeking out the hidden narratives that shape our world.